Yo, what's up? Today I want to share my comments and criticisms on MGTOW and veganism. For those of you who don't know, MGTOW means men going their own way, and it involves abstinence from marriage and long-term relationships. And veganism means the abstinence of animal products. You don't consume any animal products. And personally, I adhere to both of these things. I'm a man going my own way. I don't want to get married. I've never wanted to get married. I don't think that being married or being in a long-term relationship, living with a woman, is a very beneficial thing for a man to do. It's very, very limited benefits and very, very high risk, especially marriage, because of all the laws and the legal things you get involved in, especially divorce rape. And I'm a vegan because I feel that this is the most sustainable diet, a plant-based vegan diet. I also feel this is a very ethical way to live because I don't want to harm animals, especially when you look at the way that animals are treated on factory farms. And also I feel that eating plant foods, which veganism, at least my vegan diet is based on plant foods. Vegan doesn't have any animal products involved, so it is plant foods. Which again is very healthy, and there's various reasons for that. Just quickly, I would say, for example, when you don't eat animal foods or processed foods, it reduces the metabolic waste that your body produces, which in turn means that you will have low risk of things like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, nephritis, and so on, autoimmunities, all of these things. So that's a bit about MGTOW and veganism and why I follow these two things. Now, perhaps I would like to talk about how these two things mesh, because there's a lot of information about MGTOW and there's also a lot of information about veganism. And I'm sure there are some other people out there who are MGTOW and vegan, but I've never really come across any information to do with that. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is some similarities between MGTOW and veganism. Let's talk about slavery and oppression. Now, those are strong words. Yes. There's no doubt that the way that farm animals are treated, they are treated very oppressively. All sorts of procedures like, say, de-beaking, which is when you cut off a bird's beak, dehorning, or when you cauterizing with the hot rod on cattle, and many deep towing, all things like this are things that are involved in factory farming. Not to mention the abuse, the killing, the veal calf industry. These are all quite oppressive towards animals, and I feel that they're very an unnecessary thing to do. You might note also that 50% of chickens, that is male chicks, are incinerated at birth. And something you'll notice in all of these factory farming is that the female of the species is highly prized. Dairy milk cattle would be a classic example of this. There are some bulls, but there's probably like one bull for every 50 to 100 cows, and only, I guess, the alpha cow gets to survive because that's the semen they want to use. So the males are seen as quite disposable. Again, classic example, the chicks being incinerated at birth. The chickens are female, the cows are female. If you're a male calf, then you will be alive for a few months and then you will be slaughtered. So something that I can see from being a vegan is that male animals are viewed as disposable, and likewise male humans are also seen as disposable. You look at homelessness. Most men are homeless because they don't have those things to fall back on their woman can. Men are more likely to commit suicide. You've got the alimony, vagina money, divorce settlements, child support. We've got domestic violence against men that's not recognized, more men overall being raped, and that's not recognized. There's so many ways that a typical man is, for lack of a better word, oppressed and seen as being disposable, a sort of slave. And this, I suppose, brings me to another point, which is about this term we call livestock. Animals are seen as property. We call them livestock, and that means that they are living creatures which are property. They are stocks, like you would float on the stock market, right? And I went vegetarian back in the day when I was at uni. That'd probably be 2009. Yeah, I moved out of home. I lived in the Auckland Central Business District, and this was a very formative years for me of my adult life. I lived in this concrete jungle, and I didn't really like it too much. There were a lot of benefits, but I really always felt happier in a rural area. It seemed more real. And I often inquired into more conspiracy type subjects like Illuminati and Freemasons and things like this, and things like, for example, the depopulation theories, about which Bill Gates has openly said, and other people have said. There's a lot of people that want to reduce the population of the planet, and there's no denying we're a population crisis, but does that mean we should exterminate people? Anyway, more to the point, I sort of thought about that, and the way the ruling class, the ruling elite, viewed the people below them, the 1%ers, if you want to call them that, viewed the other 90%, kind of viewed them as livestock, as cattle, and some people would even use these terms as cattle. So human beings treat animals as livestock, and in many ways the society in general treats men as a kind of livestock. We're kind of just there to produce, kind of like a cow is just there to produce. It doesn't have any inherent value. Once it stops producing, they have to slaughter cows to keep their business profitable. And you could see that in the form perhaps of homeless men. If you're not producing, you don't bring home the bacon, whatever you want to call it. You can really see how disposable men are viewed. You're on the streets. So this is another similarity between MGTOW and veganism. It has to do with oppression and slavery and being viewed as a utility. Now, fundamentally, I think that veganism can be divided into three sections. Although it's rooted on an ethical perspective and abstaining from the use and unnecessary use and exploitation of animals, you could basically talk about it in terms of ethics, in terms of sustainability, in terms of health, because veganism means the absence of animal products, which inherently involves plant foods. That means you have to eat plants and use plant-based products. Those could be whole plant foods, or they could be refined plant foods, or for other plant products like making a belt out of fiber, for example. So that means that aside from the ethical aspects, which people often talk about, there's also the matters of sustainability and health. And these are also two areas which correlate with MGTOW, the manosphere, the men's movement, men's rights. And the specific reason for that is, first of all, traditionally, men do not think of their health very much compared with women. Women tend to be far more conscientious about their health. Men are not. You could see in the 1920s, a woman lived on average 1 year longer than men. And now, on average, a woman lives 7 years longer than men. So I wouldn't say there's a health crisis with men, but I would say that this is definitely an aspect of the health of men that is traditionally neglected. And this is because they are involved in honor-based activities, duty-based activities, self-sacrificial activities. They're putting others before themselves, and that often costs them their health. alongside the fact that just in general a lot of people aren't healthy these days. And when men decide that they are going to go their own way, they're going to take responsibility for themselves and prioritize themselves and their freedom, a lot of them start to prioritize their health. And I can say that's been one thing that has happened for me, becoming more conscious about my health, which is because of MGTOW and because of veganism and because of other things. So this is a positive thing that MGTOW brings. MGTOW men are more health conscious. They certainly, I would say, have a better mental health. Of course, health is a holistic thing. Just like when a lot of men become vegans, or they become a bit more health conscious, because fundamentally this is a branch that is attached to veganism. It's very hard to, it's not the foundation of veganism, but it is hard to separate that from veganism. So there is the health aspect. These are two areas where MGTOW and veganism connect. Now the next example is sustainability. Now when you think about it, so much of what we do comes back to survival, and we don't really need to look after our basic necessities these days, but still a lot of it, it comes down to survival. And there is a real problem these days with the environment, and the question of how long is the world gonna last. I mean, the planet's not going to explode, but if we're talking about civilization and whether or not we'll have a functional civilization, whether or not it will end catastrophically, there'll be some sort of collapse, or whether we're having the best society possible, there's areas where MGTOW and veganism connects. The first thing is that the environmental pollution with things like climate change, these are this is fueled by the animal industry. This is something that most vegans recognize. For example, 51% of greenhouse gases come from animal agriculture, and that's including carbon dioxide and the nitrogen and the methane, which, by the way, are far more powerful in terms of their overall contribution to their effect on climate change compared with CO2. And other things like the amount of effluent, the poo-poo, the amount of water usage. There's not much fresh water in the world. These are problems that really, they're things that create a lot of problem for the future of our civilization, whether it's going to be sustainable or not. And really that's a survival thing, isn't it? That's a survival thing. Now with MGTOW, we also find that there are a lot of problems which come from, I would say, the feminization of society and the level to which men's rights are simply not recognized, the level to which a lot of men are invisible and seen as disposable utilities. And of course, you could say the toxicity of a lot of women, the way that affects society. You look at, for example, single mothers raising their children, especially sons. They'll grow up to become men who are far more likely to be unproductive members of society, criminals, drug dealers, gang bangers, suiciders, homiciders, you name it. And this is really a problem that has to do with the survival of at least our culture, our civilization, our society. Western culture is facing a lot of problems. You can see, for example, Islam is quite a strong factor in, or even mass immigration presents a lot of problems. You could see those cologne attacks, for example. A lot of the women say we should open our borders and bring these people in, and then they go and rape them. It's kind of to their detriment, isn't it? So men are becoming more feminized and women are becoming more masculine. Those traditional gender roles aren't really as strong anymore. And while traditional gender roles might be not necessarily good, I think that women have had the ability to step outside of their traditional gender roles, while men haven't really. And this is a foundation of a lot of the problems which cause men to become things like MGTOW, is that, back in the day, both sexes were oppressed, and they were slaves to because they needed to survive. This had to be done to survive. And now we don't. Women have kind of been liberated and recognized, and their struggles have been recognized, but the struggles of men haven't really been recognized. So these issues, MGTOW issues, really affect the sustainability of the future of Western civilizations. These millennial women, the way they're going, if things don't change, it's going to reach a catastrophic kind of pinnacle where something dramatic changes and things take a turn for the better, or things take a turn for the worse. And this is also something that you're looking at with climate change, environmental pollution, which is a kind of a branch of veganism. Perhaps a final similarity is that MGTOW and veganism kind of fundamentally are not so much like philosophies, but they are not so much movements. They are just an abstention from something. MGTOW means I won't get married, I won't be involved with women. Veganism means I won't consume animal products, right? I won't be involved with that. And of course, it really gets a lot more complicated than that, but fundamentally, they're very similar in that way. Oh, and another thing is, if you say you're MGTOW, people rebuke you and think you're crazy. And if you say you're vegan, people don't take that very well either. Apart from this, there are a lot of differences between veganism and MGTOW. I won't go into that in great detail, but you could look, for example, at the fact that about 80% of vegans are female. You certainly couldn't say 80% of people going their own way, abstaining from marriage and long-term relationships, are women. MGTOW also don't tend to proselytize very actively and go around telling people, you should be MGTOW, don't get married. They don't proselytize as actively as vegans, for example. You probably wouldn't find people doing street interviews for MGTOW, or holding a protest like well, you could find men's rights activists doing that, but MGTOW aren't really about that. Perhaps if you took the whole manosphere, you could find more similarities with veganism. Anyway, more differences. Veganism is associated with leftism, social justice warriors, feminists, again, because it's kind of female dominated. You certainly wouldn't find this with MGTOW, but I don't think that's something intrinsic to veganism. It's more just a sign of the times and the fact that so many vegans are female. Another difference would be is that MGTOW is fundamentally something that is based on selfishness, self-preservation, and looking after yourself. Whereas veganism, although it presents benefits for yourself, such as the health benefits, it really is something a bit more altruistic, because it's, abstaining from animal products because you don't want to use animals unnecessarily. It's really something more looking outside of yourself. That would be a big difference. But yes, so there's some similarities and differences between MGTOW and veganism. I think, just to sum up, one final similarity that they have is, I think in the future, that they are both going to increase and become more popular. You can see in Japan that so many herbivore men, who are basically Japanese MGTOW, up to 60% of people in 20 to 35 demographic are herbivore men or Japanese MGTOW. So if that's anything to go by, these problems aren't going anywhere. If anything, they're getting worse. And I think that a lot of men will become more aware, and things like MRA and red pill and MGTOW become more popular. Anything that really has to do with men's rights and awareness of these things. And also, people are becoming more aware of the problems to do with the animal industries, the animal products, and things like climate change and mass chronic disease, and hopefully some empathy for other living creatures will stimulate more to become vegan. Certainly, these plant-based products are becoming far more acceptable and widespread in society. Both of these, I won't say movements because MGTOW's not a movement, both of these things are due to increase if current trends continue. And I'm quite satisfied that I'm a man going my own way, and also that I am a man who is a vegan.